presentation, Peace Corps in Ukraine, our experiences, our stories, cultural facts, maybe some language, if you'd like to learn some Ukrainian. But yeah, thank you so much, Keene Public Library, for having us here. Thank you so much, Gail. Thank you, Jay, for technical support. Let me quickly point out that we are Peace Corps volunteers. We served in Ukraine in different years in various places, and so we'll share experiences. So I would like to quickly introduce all of you. So please say your name and where you served and when.
Robin Picard, and I was in a city called Gadiach or Hadich, if you speak Ukrainian. And I was there from 2013 to 2014 and evacuated with the political turmoil in Maidan.
Hello, my name is Nuna Hathaway, and I served from 2019 to the evacuation in March of 2020 with COVID. And I was at a school for the deaf in Novomiro, Kibotraska.
My name is Janine Vin, or in the States, Janine Wynn. I served in Kosmat, which is in the Carpathian Mountains, from 2017 to 2019, extended for a year, and was evacuated in March of 2020. Kosmat is a large village, and long story short, I worked with kids around the issues of plastic waste and littering. And I live in a very small town in Maine, outside of Farmington.
Thank you. Дуже дякуємо for coming all the way from Maine. Have a seat. We'll have more of your stories later. And I'm Anastasia. I'm a recruiter for Peace Corps. I served also in Ukraine in 2018 to 19 in Mykolaiv, which is in the south. And we're going to talk about Ukraine geography as well. I also served in Ghana and Armenia because I love Peace Corps so much. So I just couldn't stop. And I think Robin, you didn't stop either. So did anyone heard about Peace Corps before? Yes, okay. So it's our mission. It hasn't changed since 1961 when John F. Kennedy founded it. It's to promote world peace and friendship. And it's so important these days. It's such an important mission, and we're very, very proud to serve with Peace Corps in Ukraine and other countries. And Peace Corps Ukraine started it very, actually fairly early on, shortly after the breakup of Soviet Union in 1992. So it's been going on for a while. There was an evacuation after the Maidan Revolution in 2014. Then there was a global evacuation of volunteers in 2020 due to COVID-19 pandemic. That is where all the countries were evacuated. But Peace Corps has been coming and going to Ukraine, and we're really hoping that it will return after a more peaceful transition. These are the regions of the Peace Corps countries. In the 61 years of our existence, we served in over 120 countries. And in the past 2 years, since 2020, since before the pandemic started, we were in over 60 countries. And Ukraine was one of them, as you can see, in the Europe region. These are our stats. So again, there were over 7,000 volunteers in the field at the time of COVID-19 pandemic. And Ukraine is the biggest post. It was the biggest post. It had over 300 volunteers at a time per year. It's a 2-year program. So you would have second-year volunteers finishing up, newcomers coming in, and the first-year volunteers still in the middle of their service. And so me and Janine, for example, we overlapped. She came in 2017 and I came a year later, and we had some fun. We went bowling one time, right? But yeah, just some stats. You have to be American citizen to qualify for volunteering, and 90% or 95% have at least undergraduate degree, but that is not the requirement. You can actually have 5 years of professional experience and stay qualified to be a volunteer. And 7%, I love this, 7% of volunteers are over 50, which means we can always improve, we can always increase this percentage. And this is our concentrations or sectors of service. And Ukraine has had, I believe, 3: youth and development, education, and community economic development. And education is the biggest sector overall in Peace Corps, and a lot of volunteers teach English, and this is what was the program in Ukraine. Oh, there was health too. Thank you so much. Yeah, was your health. Yeah, okay, great. I was a community development volunteer, but it was also concentrated on health. Basically, all these sectors overlap, and our guests may share some stories of what exactly they were doing for their primary assignment and also some secondary projects. They sound secondary, but actually the most fun. And so Ukraine, second largest country in Europe, over 40 million people as of, well, pre-war. Tons of cities, lots of industries, the variety of natural areas. Of course, there's Black Sea, there are rivers, Dnipro, Bug, there is Zakarpattia, there's Carpathian Mountains that are really, really old and ancient, kind of like Appalachians. There are fields, wheat fields, sunflower fields. This is not just a coincidence that the flag is yellow and blue. It literally shows the fields of sunflowers or the fields of wheat or the fields of yellow.
The rapeseed?
Sure,
Oh,
yes.
They call it something else.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's
What is it?
basically
But I don't
like
have
for the
it.
hay, exactly. Official language is Ukrainian, but people speak Russian. It's a bilingual, multicultural country, actually, because if you look at the western part of Ukraine, as you see, which borders Poland and Romania and Hungary, some people speak Hungarian or Polish there. So it is multicultural indeed. Some more pictures. It says here, land of trains, vistas, and modernist architecture. So Ukraine was part of Soviet Union, so it had a lot of imposing buildings and statues. This is the Mother Ukraine with the sword and a shield, and the trains are just crisscrossing the country. And we would take trains overnight to Kiev and back, or to Lviv or Odessa, or to visit friends, or to do trainings, or to, I don't know, just to on vacation with friends, right? There's the Carpathian Mountains in the distance right there. So we spend a lot of time on the train. There are also buses as well. So it's fairly, again, the infrastructure, again, from Soviet times, held on. And the train has a very special place in our hearts. Food and drink. Ukrainian food, hearty, lots of potatoes, lots of bread, delicious bread, by the way, dark bread, very, very flavorful. Borscht is basically a national dish in Ukraine. It's a red beet soup with some cabbage, carrots, maybe sometimes beef, sometimes chicken. Every person who makes borscht, they say, I make the best borscht. Yes, there's lots of pride in borscht. There's horilka, which means firewater, which is also means vodka. Lots of flavorings there. Also salo. Anyone heard of salo? No, it's a pig fat. It's like bacon, but with skin, and it's salty, right?
And raw.
And you eat it raw with borscht or horilka, and it's delicious. I'm sorry, vegans, vegetarians out there. I'm sorry, but this is the diet for Ukrainians. They love it. Vareniki, which means pierogies, basically dumplings stuffed with cabbage, potatoes, cherries, whatever. And of course, lots of sour cream, lots of dairy, lots of butter. I love the dairy there. I ate it every day. If you like this intolerant, well, I don't know. And then lots of teas and cookies and coffee and sweets and candies. People love to have these tea parties in the office, or they would have cake like as a coffee break, and they would just eat cake and drink tea or drink coffee and chat, or they would meet at the coffee house and chat. or they just go to your house to sit in the kitchen and chat. It's all about tea and coffee and sweets and chatting. And teaching you Ukrainian. So anyone familiar with any of these letters? Okay, we'll teach you. We'll teach you a couple of phrases that you can learn. Those phrases Robin shared with me, and it's a little, a little advanced, but we can talk about it. But yeah, it's a Cyrillic alphabet, and there's lots of special letters. And this is just phrases that you can learn. So привіт is hello, привіт. Привіт. It's like private, but привіт. Привіт. Yeah, привіт. Дякую is a very good word. Дякую. Дякую. Thank you. Дякую. So it's like thank you, but дякую without N. Дякую. Дуже дякую. Thank you very much. And до побачення, до побачення. До побачення is bye-bye. До побачення means like see you later, see you then. Yeah, so we had to learn Ukrainian and also Russian. And again, people are bilingual. Sometimes you have to learn both. A little bit about this. So again, thank you, Robin, for sharing. And Robin will have show and tell. She brought a lot of things, and Janine brought her things from Western Ukraine. The clothing, the traditional clothing in Ukraine, called vyshivanka. Vyshivanka literally means embroidered shirt. And so this is what I'm wearing, and my friends are wearing. And this is my great-grandmother. And she is from Poltavska Oblast, central Ukraine. And yeah, this is just beautiful shirts. People wear it at special occasions. There's a National Vyshivanka Day, which is May 19th, and I participated in it. And there was a parade of Vyshivankas, people just wearing these shirts in my city. It was beautiful. And as you can see, every region or oblast has its own pattern for embroidery, which is also really, really cool. So yeah, it's very special. And of course, the wreath, lots of girls wear wreaths. They're worn at weddings, especially. I think in Polish, it's also called Stefanka, Stefan. Yeah, that, and Stephen comes from that word. Stephen means wreath. If you're Stephen, well, there you go. Okay, well, now it's the turn for Robin to share her stories and pictures and show and tell. Please.
Thank you.
If you want to keep that closer to
Is that the end of the bat?
No.
Okay.
Okay. So my region was right in between Kharkiv and Kiev, right smack in the middle, and just about 25 minutes from Sumy. So if you've been following the news and you recognize the name of those towns, so fairly close to the east. I was trained to speak Ukrainian, and that's a Russian-speaking part of the country. So when I went there, it took me quite a while to be understood and to understand much. And they actually spoke something called Syrzhyk, which is kind of a local dialect, I guess you would say. So I lived with an older gentleman, which was very kind of risque and took a little bit of, what's the word I want to use, finessing the people in the town so that they wouldn't think there was something odd going on, that a younger woman was living with this 80-year-old man, single man and a single woman. So it was a lot of, I was on their local TV every week. I was in their newspaper every week. And it was really to talk about what my role was as a volunteer, and that he didn't have, an American woman in his house. So I don't take a lot of pictures, and my mother used to always chide me for never having pictures of my travels. But I do take pictures of food. These were the Easter breads that they would make. And the Easter was a fascinating, fun time. We baked and baked for days, and we got up at sunrise, and we brought all the breads to the local church, and the priests had, the incense, and did their thing with our local foods. We made the eggs. This is pretty much when, and there's my dear friend and host dad, Boris, who has since sadly passed. But when people would visit, people put on a great spread. And I just loved the food, and I tried everything. I never thought I would drink vodka or eat salo, and I loved them both, sad to say. But anytime people would come over, they would just put on an array of food, which was wonderful. I do think that might have been New Year's Day, though. That might have been a little special. I worked in a library and I was in community development, and my task was, as I was told, to try to make community volunteerism voluntary. Because in the past, under communism, it was all forced volunteerism. So the idea was to get people to really want to come to the library and be taught things and have resources. So we did a lot of projects. One was we had the local social workers come in and learn about HIV, because they really kind of targeted people with HIV, and we wanted to turn that around so that they help people with HIV. We gathered a lot of women artists, and I have some things here, and we tried to teach them about Etsy. And that just blew their mind, that somebody would send their hard-earned arts and crafts overseas and expect to get money back. They could not understand the whole thing. And in the end, that project didn't work. We actually went around the country with a whole process to form these women business co-ops. But in the end, the postage really didn't work for our artists to do much. But these are the ladies I worked with in the library. And this was pretty much lunch every day. And when I first arrived, they literally put me in a closet with a small desk and a chair and shut the door and left me there for like 5 days. I didn't really know. I still don't really understand what that was about. But then they started inviting me to have lunch with them, and it was every day, and they would sneak bottles of vodka out of their drawers. And I didn't really know what to make of it either. And in the end, we did a lot of great projects, and they had people coming to learn the computer and come to different sessions, and just fabulous people. This here is what's called a marshutra. Marshutka. And these were the public transportations. What was fascinating to me was how many people you could fit in that marshutra, especially when it's hot and everybody's bundled up and you get in there and the windows are steaming, you can't see out. And one of my words was nafusta zabinka. Nastupla zabinka. And I was so proud when I learned to say that to the bus driver. Next stop, please. And I forgot for the traffic light. I knew that word. Svita floor. Yeah. Nastupla svita floor. And everybody would look at me like, wow. So that was a lot of fun. But the other fascinating thing, I just want to do a quick thought about, and if we're trying to condense a lot, and how do you understand a culture and country in our session here? But the people of Ukraine can be quite closed. And we always were given a graphic of an iceberg. And when you come to a country, it's so much fun, right? You can see different dress, different styles, different mannerisms, but you don't know all the underneath, how people relate, what things really mean, the subtleties. And what I was told about the marshutras, they are absolutely silent. And there could be 30 people crowded on there and you don't hear a word. And what I was told is, people live, there's a lot of people in one house usually, and there's not a lot of privacy. And this was the only place you could be in public and be private with yourself. And people didn't talk. And when I went, and I learned how to speak, I wanted to say, I love your shoes. And my teacher would be like slapping my thigh. No, or, look at your coat. And they said, Robin, you cannot speak on these because people really value it's a time to be private and quiet. So that was just a lot of fun to see these. And I will tell you, there was only one purple one. And I always felt like if I saw a purple marshutra in the morning, it was like a unicorn. And that I knew was going to be a good day. That's my little piece, as funny and sporadic as it is. But I just have to say, it's a fascinating country. It's a fascinating culture. And it's just tearing us all apart, I know, the current.
Thank you. Дуже дякую. Again, Robin will have some show and tell when we have time. It's okay. It's okay. There's some vintage stuff. Great. Next stop would be Western Ukraine. Janine, are you ready?
Yes.
Please share your stories.
Yes, and how many hours do I have?
Plenty.
Okay, I do want to say, I want to add just a little bit to Robin about the buses. I lived in a small village in Western Ukraine. We had several buses come in and out every day. Most of them were 21 passenger buses. I counted 75 people getting off one of them one day.
I'm sure.
And then I was one of about 30 or 40 people getting back on. The nice thing was that usually people made sure I had a seat. If the bus was really, really crowded, not so. But I was older, which confused a lot of people. Some of the younger volunteers told me that when they told their host families about me, and I turned 70 when I was in Ukraine, the host families said, well, why isn't family letting her do that? Why isn't she home with her grandchildren? So we had all that going on. But anyway, oh, and the other thing about the buses, they were very hot, they were crowded, and you didn't dare open a window
No.
because Babusia, the grandmother, would yell at you. You could be out in the wind and no problem. But if you were in a building or a bus and there was a breeze, it was going to make you sick. So there were many disagreements about windows. So I lived in Kosmach, which is a large village in the western part of Ukraine. In the Carpathian Mountains. And we weren't in the rugged mountains. This is the smaller mountains. We've already gone past the foothills and the vistas were just amazing. There's a lot of high mountain meadows. So if you go for a walk, you can see forever and it was wonderful. And Kosmach is also way off the beaten track. The roads to get into Kosmach are in very bad shape. If you wanted to go there, you really wanted to be there. Okay, so most Peace Corps volunteers, as soon as they can, they get their own apartment or their own little house to live in. I lived with this family. Paraska was my host. She is 15 years younger than me, so she's not my host mother. Sorry. She's the director of the local music school. Her daughter, Olya, who at the time was 35, Maria was 7 or 8 in this picture. Petro, sweet guy when he wasn't drinking, huge alcohol problem, which you run into a lot in Ukraine. And then this is Petro's mother, Maria. She was 80 at the time. Paraska's mother, also named Maria, was 80. I later found out that the two Marias were first cousins. So Petro and Paraska were second cousins, not unusual in small villages. And there also was a son, Yuri, who was 25 at the time and a doctor. And he just got married last summer. I was able to go back for this humongous wedding. The family cow. I made very, very close friends with an English teacher from the next village over. She had acted as my translator one day, and we just hit it off. And I was visiting her one day, and we were in the stable. She was going to milk the cow. And I asked her what her cow's name was, and she was a little startled. And she said, she doesn't have a name. And I was quite surprised because the family cow in the States would have a name. The goat had a name, but the cow didn't. So I went home and I asked Paraska, did your cow have your name? What's your cow's name? And she looked at me and laughed, thought a minute and said, Paraska's cow.
Yeah.
This is a group of school children that I work with. I ended up doing a lot of work with kids around the issues of plastic waste and littering, both huge problems in Ukraine. We, at least in the States, began to get a handle on littering and garbage before plastic hit us. Not so in a lot of developing countries. So they've got a ways to go. They're getting it. And the kids were great to work with. My philosophy was sort of like 4-H, which was started as a means to teach children modern farming procedures so that they would quietly, subtly teach their parents. I hitchhiked a lot. It was a very safe place to hitchhike. And oftentimes I would hitch a ride on a sled. And this happened to be a very, very delightful day. So this is Vasil Zeus, who gave me a ride back into town. And this is at Easter. And I took a lot of pictures. I really had fun taking pictures. And the priests, I'm not familiar with Roman Catholic ceremonies and masses and such. I became more familiar with Ukrainian Orthodox. Easter time, people would bring their Easter baskets. They didn't bring all the bread they baked because it was a lot. And by the way, the decorations on the bread is very different from one region to another. The embroidery patterns, embroidery colors are very different region to region. And the colors, did I say the colors? Yeah. So anyway, at Easter, the family, including Yuri and I, went to the church. The baskets were all out there. After the mass, so many more pictures I can show you. There's a whole procession around the church. People are carrying these fantastically embroidered banners. The choir, the priest, priest helpers who are carrying the holy water. And so the priest comes around and he's sprinkling everybody, he's sprinkling the baskets, and he sprinkled our family group, and he looked up and saw me, dips his, whatever you call that thing, dips it in the bucket again and unloads the whole thing on me. I was not sure if it was because they were welcoming and blessing my work in Coastmatch, or if he thought that I was particularly sinful. I don't know. But you know, and you said you found people very close, and in the Western villages where I was, I did not find that so. It seemed, you know, people were so welcoming, so happy for me to be there. Except for the village chairman who decided that I was a spy and made it very difficult for me to do any of the work that I was supposed to be doing there. Hence, I ended up working with the kids. And I also wrote for a regional newspaper, which I had been doing here at home. So I was sending articles to the Franklin Journal in Farmington, Maine, and also the regional newspaper where I was, and that was fun to do. Oh, and these are bog boots that I bought just before I went. And the first few times that I wore those when they were still brand new and shiny in the village, it was very curious. And I would occasionally hear when I go by, I hear somebody say, "That's the American." So I was a celebrity in a lot of ways, which was fun. So I was living with this family as a host family for a while. Initially, you are required to live with a host family, kind of get oriented. And when it came time that I could move out, they didn't want me to leave. And I, in this compound, sort of, no fence, but compound, Olya had her own house. She was married. Her husband was working in Poland or the Czech Republic a great deal of the time. And then there was Petro and Paraska's house. The grandmother lived nearby. And their son Yuri, the doctor, was also living in that house. Yuri's married now, so that house is Yuri's house, and they're in another building, new building on the property. And I ended up with a room off the old kitchen, and we're in the old kitchen at this point. And it was great because the old kitchen was where all of the family activity went on. If a pig was slaughtered, that's where we processed the meat. Family celebrations, except Christmas. Christmas we had in the main house, Christmas dinner, but everything else was in the old kitchen. So I was right in the center of things, and I absolutely loved it. I was very involved in neighborhood weddings. I had been there only about a month and a half when Paraska's sister's husband died, and she told me to bring my camera, and they made sure I was wearing the appropriate clothing. And I took, there were 2 days that we spent helping to make food for the funeral dinner. If I had been living on my own, I would have never had those experiences. And those kind of experiences also bonded me to the community. So on one hand, I had Dmitro Vervanichuk, who thought I was a spy, was telling other people in the office not to talk to me, not to work with me, which was really weird. Because I go into the office and people barely say hello. I was there a year and a half before I figured this out. And then things changed a lot. So I lost my train of thought. Anyway, you know, my experiences in the village, because of my connection with people, were great. So the whole purpose of my being there to work with the village council kind of fell flat. But I got gold stars for my cultural integration. And for me personally, that was the best part. You know, working with the kids was great. But learning about this community and learning to fit into the community, in spite of the fact that I never became anywhere close to fluent in Ukrainian, it made for a lot of funny experiences. I had shopkeepers laugh when I tried to ask for something. I got better as time went on, but I never felt that any of the laughter was divisive. I wasn't being dismissed. In many ways, I was like a pet, and they were laughing at me the same way you laugh at your cute little dog doing something, so it was fine. So how much time? Because like I said, I can
We
talk
have
for
time.
hours.
Yeah. No, we'll definitely, Дуже дякую. We'll definitely do more show and tell.
Okay.
So yeah. Let's go south. So we went to central Ukraine, western Ukraine. Now it's time to go to southern Ukraine, where I lived and worked. Yeah, so this is Mykolaiv, the shipbuilder city. So it's in the south, about 2 hours from Odessa. You probably heard of that city too. And it's on the Great Bug River. So it's not on the Black Sea per se, but it's on the estuary into Black Sea, and the oblast of the region were bordering Black Sea. So it's pretty importantly strategic place. And I always compared Mykolaiv with Oakland because it's also shipbuilder city, and the people there are just like Oaklanders, they're like rough, tough guys. While Odessa is like San Francisco, it's party and the humor, and they're all very different. So I was there for 1 year. I did a response program, peaceful response, which is more niche program versus 2-year service. But I still had to like integrate and stuff. So I did a running club in Mykolaiv. We went to different races. We went to Kiev, we went to Dnipro and did half marathons. There's a stadium, but we just do practices. And everywhere I moved, and I moved a lot, including Kiev, which was like only a month ago, I would try to find a place to run or a running club and a library. So I found both. In Mykolaiv. It's a fairly big city. It's almost 500,000 people. It's huge. And again, the main industry was shipbuilding. And then it kind of declined after the Soviet Union collapsed. But they also got into agriculture. So there were lots of fields, like I mentioned, lots of wheat, lots of sunflowers, vegetables. So there was actually very like sort of a breadbasket of Ukraine. And the entire Ukraine is called the breadbasket of Europe. This is just a street, and as you can see marshrutny there, marshutkas. This was a very interesting, like elaborate building, and I have a postcard from Mykolaiv too, and it's a drawing of that building and also other buildings that are kind of like memorable, that makes Mykolaiv. And it's also done by the local artist, and I just talked to her the other day. She's doing fine, and she's really grateful for our support. But yeah, this used to be a cafe for kids, like a kids cafe, where they would like drink milk cocktails, not milkshakes. Then it became a trolley depot, the trolleys with those like trams and trolleys. And now, and when I was there, it was a bank. So people like they refurbish, they reuse different buildings for different purposes, and it's basically like the essence of Ukrainians. They're very versatile. They're very crafty. Like they can just convert things really quickly. This was near Kherson, so I was literally like in between Kherson and Odessa. only maybe 50 minutes from Kherson, and this is a Dnipro estuary that also goes into the Black Sea, and there's a plavny, which means these really, really green and bushy, quiet streams, and we went kayaking there, and it was interesting. We had to literally like go like through the jungles. I felt like Rambo, but without my oar was my sword or whatever it was. And then my main project was HIV, actually not HIV reduction per se, but capacity building at HIV-based charities, because Ukraine has one of the highest HIV rates in Europe. It's a stigmatized problem. There's a lot of kids who are born with HIV, as well as people who contract HIV, like risk groups. And so I worked with that organization, and basically we did some grant writing, project management and design, but I also did kids camps, because this is what you do. You kind of combine things based on what your community wants or needs. Everyone wanted to learn English. And actually lots of Ukrainians already know English. And which you may have noticed in the interviews, a young generation, people my age. So this was part of the leadership camp, and we did it in English, and we did it with other volunteers. And it's also in the city of Mykolaiv. And we did fundraising, like a core class with kids. They needed to come up with a charity that they wanted to support, and find a local charity, figure out the campaign, make a poster, and then do fundraising campaign in this kids park, children's park in the middle of the city, right? Actually, next to this tower. The park was called Skaska, which means fairy tale, and it had different rides, so to speak. It had like the ship right there, and they had like different fairy tale characters, like statues. And so these kids, they came up with like bowling, they made like little bowling from toilet paper leftovers, they made different challenges for people, and they raised money. And then we did this dance, one of the viral videos that the dances that was popular at the time. I don't think I can replicate that, but it was a lot of fun. And I actually did camps in other places. In Chernihiv, for example, was a camp heal for HIV positive kids to teach them and encourage them to be leaders, to reduce stigma, to make them more confident. So that's basically, again, what Ukraine is all about. So I'm gonna pause, and we're gonna do show and tell, and then our last presenter will present pictures here, okay? So Robin, why don't you show your stuff? I can hold the microphone for that.
And I just want to clarify, so where I was stationed was a city, small city. So when I say it was closed, it's a difference between being in, a city here and a smaller village. But once you were accepted by the community, believe me, there was a cloak of protection around me, and people knew everything I did every minute of the day. And if I went to the post office and I had a package from my daughter, a week later, in the school would say, "So what was in that package?" So it was an open society in that way, but you had to be accepted first. So I'll just show you quickly. I went to a fair where it was kind of like the Springfield, the Biggie. And one of the things I did at that fair was to go to a doll making class. And this is a very standard kind of doll. And it has the traditional outfit on. And if anybody wants to look at it later, it's really kind of cool because it literally just starts. I know we have crafters back there from a piece of cloth. So I was very proud of that because I am not a crafter. I have a pin that was just laying around the library, and it was the 350-year celebration of the place where I live. So the history is unbelievable. My host family, Boris, gave me quite a few things as I was leaving. When I was leaving, it was very, very emotional because we were being evacuated and quite dangerous, and it was sudden. And so there wasn't a lot of time really, but he went into a big closet that always had a lot of things in there, and all of a sudden came out with some gifts. So this his grandmother embroidered, and I don't know the name of these, But they use them, they place them over like icons,
Oh,
and paintings and stuff.
Towels.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, they do it called
Rushnik, rushnik.
Rushnik.
Yes.
I use it, around the window, but, just stunning. These were made in, my little place, Hadach, my city, and they're little tea or coffee. I never saw anybody use these. But I was gifted to these, I think I have 4 of them and ended up taking home 2. You can come and look. This is the outfit that was in Anastasia's picture with her grandmother. And this is.
Not the same one.
Not the same one. This was Boris's grandmother. So
Wow.
Boris was in his 80s when I was there. So this is really quite old. And he had 2 that he had in a trunk. And he asked me to pick one. I'm gonna cry talking about it. And I just kept saying, I can't. And then his daughter came out and she said, you must. So, and I just, this is lovely. There's a belt that goes with it, but I couldn't find the belt this today when I was getting ready. And then there's another tea set. And then there is a little beanie here I'll just show because my daughter, some of you know her, decided she would make snowboarding beanies.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to give those out as fast as she can make them for people to support Ukraine right now. For free.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Janine, would
Yes.
you like to?
Oh, I would love to. And I have 2 hours again to it?
Yes, plenty of time.
Good. As I said, I got good grades for cultural integration. And I found the people in the community where I live to be incredibly generous. And as I mentioned, I turned 70 while I was in Ukraine. Was the shirt that I'm wearing was given to me by family members, by Paraska's sister. The very first Christmas I was there, and children usually get Christmas presents, but adults do not. And Christmas presents are given on St. Nicholas Day, which is November 19th, I believe. So Christmas itself is not a gift-giving day. It's very definitely a holy day. There's a big dinner the night before, Christmas Eve, and Christmas Day is just more and more food, and of course vodka. Vodka is staple. The first Christmas I was there, Olya gave me this beaded necklace. And this is a very traditional, very popular design in the region where I was. And you can, this is in Kosmach region, the patterns are all very geometric and they're all cross stitch. You wouldn't see floral on Vishibanka where I live. And the colors are very different. This is also cross stitch, but in other regions where they do floral things, you might be using other kinds of embroidery stitches. And I embroidered while I was there. I did a lot of knitting. Those are things that I would do anyway. So it was nice to be in a community where that was all supported. They also, for my birthday, I now have the complete head to toe national dress. And several times I was asked by Ukrainians, what's the national dress in America? And we don't have one. And they would be shocked.
Yeah.
They'd be shocked. I was asked when my angel day, when my saint day was. I don't have a saint day. I don't have an angel day. And people would be shocked. Your saint day, also called your angel day, was in many ways more important than your birthday. So, and I know I'm jumping around, but that's the way my brain works. So these are handmade leather shoes. They were made by someone in the community. The style now is to decorate them with lots of sequins and such. The socks are hand knit. All this little stuff, this is all hand knit. I hope you take a little look at it. Scarpetti, and I forget the name of the word for. So the socks are Scarpetti. I'll remember that name later on.
Scarpetki is.
The
Those are
socks.
Socks,
Yeah.
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 Chirivichki?
No, not in Kosmach.
Okay.
And Kosmach was never a Russian-speaking village. Even though education for a long period of time had to happen in Russian and any legal business was in Russian, Kosmachi people hung on to their regional heritage. And there was a dialect or a language in that region called Hutzul, the ethnic group is Hutzul. And there was still a lot of Hutzul words laced into the Ukrainian in that region. And Peace Corps volunteers who visited me from other parts of the country remarked that the accent was very different, like, Texans versus New Englanders. And there was also a young man who was very closely connected with the family. I never could understand him, and he tried to use Google Translate on my phone and it wouldn't work. And it wasn't until a volunteer who was fluent in Ukrainian came to visit that I learned that this kid had a speech impediment. I would have never guessed. But, so they're resourceful. Ukrainians are very resourceful. So the older women especially, and certainly women my age, would wear headscarves. And all day long, they'd be tightening up their headscarf a little bit. Younger women would tend to tie them under their hair. If I do that, it just falls off. And I'm walking along the street one day, and there's an older woman coming towards me, and she's got two bags from the bazaar, two bags full of food and stuff. And she's walking along and she's talking loudly to herself. And I'm thinking, this is a little weird. She got closer and I realized she had her cell phone tucked in under her tight headscarf and she was talking to somebody on the phone. So this would be the sort of everyday scarf that you would wear. Anything that you're doing, you want to keep your hair out of the way. A few times I put a scarf and somebody would turn around and look at me and laugh. They just found it very funny to see me in a scarf. When you are wearing Native American word regalia, but when you're wearing the national dress and you're going to a festival day or a wedding, you would have an orange scarf. And so at weddings, I would often be up in the choir loft, 2-hour masses, and nobody sits except there a few for old people. And I had a big problem with sciatica while I was there, so I would often sit with the old people. Or I would go up into the choir loft. Paraska sang in the choir, and you would look down and there'd be the sea of orange scarves, orange being the most predominant color in the region where I was. But you also had to have black scarf in your wardrobe to wear to funerals and sad holy days prior to Easter. And then a lot of people had white ones to wear on Easter and such. It was all wonderful. And I could honestly talk for 2 hours, but I will stop.
We might. Thank you. Okay. This is Jacqueline. Okay, one more experience, please take it away.
So normally I was presenting in the United States using Ukraine. I would be doing all this in sign language, but for now we're going to do it in English. So as we were talking about earlier, the responses are very niche. And my response position was working at a school for the deaf. And this was the first time they were wanting to introduce deaf education for American volunteers to come to the country. This does not mean we were coming into the country to teach American Sign Language. What this was is we were coming into the country to find out the best ways to teach English to deaf students with, in this case, Ukrainian Sign Language, and maybe a little bit of finger spelling here and there. So I already knew Russian and American Sign Language coming into university and coming into Ukraine. And that was because I had spent my senior year in St. Petersburg, Russia, which now is a very interesting dichotomy since I have experiences in both countries. And everyone used to laugh because I know American Sign Language and Russian, and I was doing linguistics for my bachelor's degree, and they're saying, come on, at least like Spanish and Italian, we understand, Russian, Ukrainian, we understand, but a spoken language and a sign language that has nothing to do with each other? Come on. But the thing that linguistics love to do is take two languages that have nothing to do with each other and figure out the similarities between them. So that was always great. And this is actually a photo of our swearing-in ceremony, and I hope everyone on Zoom can see it as well. And as you can see, it's very, very small, but very talented group of people. And one thing that I can tell you of the Ukrainian nationals that are in this photo are doing some of the most important work in Ukraine right now. They are phenomenal. And something that we'd like to say, and I'd like to say specifically, is that we are not going there to be, oh, I'm an American and I know everything and I need to teach you. It really is, I need you to teach me about your country, about your culture, your heritage, your language, and how can I help a little bit? Maybe is it publicity, going to the newspapers and helping that way? Is it maybe using some connections with the embassy or with the American House and getting things out there in the open? So within 20 minutes, the program manager, she, the 6 of us up were response, and she looks back and she's, Milanichka, I'm so happy you're in the Ukrainian group. You're going to be learning Ukrainian for these next 2 weeks. And I just looked at the ceiling of the van and was like, no, this is going to be the 5th language. Please, I'm done. Please, no. But 2 weeks later, we were in a swearing-in ceremony, and it was just fun. So this was our response cohort. Lovely group of people who are in touch with still all of them. We still have our original WhatsApp group called the Luna. So Luna, who is she? We don't know. Never know. And yeah, so let's see. I have my little notes here. And for our swearing-in ceremony, during this time, we were doing our presentation. So some of us would speak Ukrainian, some of us would speak Russian, some of us would speak English, and then I was doing American Sign Language interpreting when the newscasts were there. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it in Ukrainian because I knew very little Ukrainian Sign Language at the time, but that would change eventually. So first, we go into our host families. And the interesting thing about my site was it was a residential school for the job. So Monday through Friday, my students were there. And my host mother was one of the TAs at the end of the school day who watched the children. Everyone knew where she lived, so randomly my students would come over around like 6, 7, borscht and whatnot, or I want to see like babushka and whatnot. And I think the word for Ukrainian or Russian for spy is shpion. Someone help me out here. But they would look to me, oh, what will be evil? Oh, the spy dreams there, the spy dreams. Oh, this is wonderful. We didn't know that. Let's see. And we talked about some fun things of what hair. I don't care if I have to dry my hair before I go out to work and whatnot. But one time I showed up to school with wet hair. And the sign in Ukrainian sign language for wet is mokre. So all of my students were like, mokre. What's happened? Mokre, your hair, you're going to be sick, you're going to die, something's going to happen to you. So they grabbed me and they brought me to the PE teacher, and the PE teacher was like, mokre, come on, what's wrong with you? Okay, here's the dryer. And so right before I was teaching my class, I had to dry my hair in the PE teacher's office. So my students would stop signing up. And some things that I was really, really happy with is that at the same time at the school, I was teaching English with a little bit of help for sign language. At the same time, it was not an oral approach. So we weren't forcing the kids to speak. We were very focused on reading, writing. If they wanted to learn how to speak, great, let's meet with the school speech pathologists and work with them. And at the same time, if I wasn't teaching English, I was in a Ukrainian sign language class. So the first week that we were there, me and my counterpart went up to the teacher and she's like, hey, can she just kind of sit in? She's like, oh, she's not sitting in. She's going to sit with the students and she's going to learn with the students. And it was wonderful for them because they tried so hard. If there was a word in Ukrainian I did not know, they were like, oh, what's the American Sign Language version? Come on, we got to figure it out. Someone look it up. And so they were very prideful, especially when we had English weeks at our school. We would partner with some of the hearing schools to learn Ukrainian Sign Language and teach them a little bit of English and American Sign Language. And they'd be like, our teacher is so much cooler than yours because she knows Ukrainian Sign Language and we get to learn English by her and it's so cool. And speaking of Mykolaiv, one of our girls here in this photo, she was very not much into running, but spin classes. So if you decided, oh, I'm gonna go see her on the weekend, oh, you were gonna go to a spin class. There was no getting out of it. And so let's go over some photos as well. This was during some of our training. One of my favorite pieces of people. And like I said earlier, so here is actually some of my students in the school for the deaf. Every month we did a theater performance. And I remember they tried sometimes so hard to get me to be part of those. And I was like, please, no, that's too much publicity. I'm going to fail. But they were always very much like, no, you're going to be to the side and you're going to always have to help this. And then during English week, of course, we had, this is the sign for both American Sign Language and a lot of sign language. I love you. Yeah, it's really cool. And the next thing with Ukrainian Sign Language and American Sign Language is though my students still they're not fluent in English or American Sign Language at all, but whenever we talk on WhatsApp, when we're still in communication, even to this day, it's always Ukrainian Sign Language. So I think that's like my biggest takeaway is whatever's happening, but at least I was able to learn a language and still be able to keep in touch with my students and not having them learn my language, so it's easier for me to communicate. If I'm uncomfortable, then that just means I need to keep studying. And unfortunately, during obviously March of 2020, we did have to evacuate, and that was just really hard because none of us were ready to leave, none of us wanted to leave, and I think this was it's still hard to talk about, but a lot of us make a promise that as soon as Peace for Ukraine comes back up, whatever we're doing with our lives, give us a few months to figure it out, we'll be back. And I still make that promise today. So whenever Ukraine Peace for comes back up, you can guarantee I'm going to be one of the first people back. And this is our response. So this is actually in the airport Thursday at 2 in the morning during the evacuation. And this is our response. And it's something really important that we were talking about scarves earlier. Is my babusia, I remember we had gotten the email that we were going to be evacuated. There was only one train meeting on the weekend, and that was at 2:30 in the morning. It was 8:30 when we got that email. And I remember having to call my counterpart and being like, I'm sorry, but the only way I can get to the Capitol on time is if I leave at 2:30 in the morning within the next 6 to 8 hours. She's like, that's fine. We're going to go to the store and we're going to grab a bunch of food. We're going to get like salad. We're going to get everything and we're going to make sure to go to your host grandparents and we're going to make sure you can say goodbye and say, you're going to be back one day, but for now, being able to see them in person. And at that point in time, my students had already left, so we've gotten them on the marshrutas and the trains and everything to go back home because the schools were going to close for, at that time, it was only going to be 3 weeks. And as I was leaving, and actually, if you can see in this photo, the little bit of red that I have, so I'm the girl in the middle between the stars and the stripes. That was actually the scarf that my Lucy gave to me, and I wore that the entire time of the evacuation until we got back to the States. So, and I still have that scarf, and it's still hanging out in my room, and that's one thing that I definitely always have. And as we were saying earlier, Ukraine is the largest Peace Corps country, which pretty much understands only a portion of people were in this photo from Peace Corps during the evacuation.
Wow.
Oh, and the evacuation was insane because the airports had closed at Tuesday. We left on Friday, and their systems were down. So how do you check in 200, almost 300 people? Yeah, you check them in. Yeah, oh yeah, we kept those plane tickets because all they literally did was write our first and last name, our passport number, and they tore it off. And then we get to, I think it was in Madrid, where we had to transfer and wait for another flight to DC. And we're walking through the airport, and the people in the airport are like, where are these people coming from? Stop. Okay, what's wrong? Where's your tickets? Where's your ticket? And we're trying to show them these handwritten tickets from Ukraine. And they're like, how did all of you get into the airport and notice past security? Like, we don't believe you. So finally, someone who spoke Spanish, we're like, who speaks Spanish out of this group of 100? Finally found someone, and we were explaining the situation. We had our country director on the phone, and they're like, oh, you're that group that's flying in on the chartered flight. Yeah, we just heard about you. But sure enough, we were able to come. We were able to get past security and we eventually made it back to DC at 1 in the morning. But The one thing I'm gonna really say about Peace Corps is, you're going there to help. And really it's at the end of the day, my Ukrainian sign language is actually much better than my spoken Ukrainian. It's always, and actually, I'm gonna put this down, I'll figure out how this works. Because I would like to teach you a little bit of Ukrainian sign language. Yeah, please. Будь ласка. So the first word is будь ласка, which is будь ласка. Okay, будь ласка. Будь, like in the future, like, oh, it's in the future. Ласка, and so if you make a fist, ласка.
So
Будь
with the
ласка.
right hand? With the right hand?
Well, if you're right handed, you use your right hand. If you're left hand, you use your left.
Can I do left?
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
Будь ласка, please.
With last.
Привіт is like привіт.
Yeah.
Hello, hello. Дякую, which is thank you. Дякую. So you make like an A fist, chin to forehead. Дякую.
Can you do it again? Sorry.
Дякую. Yes. Thank you. In Russian sign language, some people may say, oh, it's from the forehead down to the chin. But okay, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Як справи? How are you? What? Як. So it's finger style. So if you cross your two fingers, як and ka. So this is як and this is ka. So як. So sometimes if you know, the people in what is it? The airports are like, you're good, you're good, you're good.
Yeah.
That handshake. Як справи.
Oh.
Справи. Як справи. Добре. Good. You're gonna go ahead and have a closed, kind of open-handed fist, like a duckbill. Добре. 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 And for the only phrase.
До побачення.
Well, дуже приємно познайомитися. Nice to meet you. But до побачення. До побачення, or the same as привіт. До побачення. Oh, and we never stop. We never stop. We always do the
That's
jazz
right, yeah.
hands. Jazz hands is the clapping. So.
Thank you.
That is great.
Дякую.
Дуже дякую.
Дуже дякую all. Thank you so much for having us. Do we have time for questions?
Yeah.
We have time for questions. Please feel free. Audience on Zoom, please type your questions.
Can you repeat the question though? I mean, like if somebody in there said something, and you said,
Sorry, say it again.
when somebody asks a question, you say. the
Of
question.
course, I'll repeat the question, yes. Yes, please.
I missed the beginning. Where are you all from originally?
Oh, where are we all from originally? Do we have 2 hours? I am, okay, I'm an immigrant. I'm actually from Kazakhstan originally, but I lived in Boston and Philly in East Coast. So Ukraine service was kind of like homecoming for me because I had Ukrainian grandma. But I live in Keene right now, okay?
And I'm originally from Rhode Island, but lived in New Hampshire for the last 20 years. I'm a Mainer, except for the period of time after my parents moved to New Jersey and kidnapped me and took me with them. But I did come back to Maine and lived in the same small town outside of Farmington for almost 40 years now. So I'm entrenched. And oh, and by the way, I had never, yeah, I know. I had never been off the North American continent before I joined Peace Corps. So in the process of the application, they asked, where do you want to go? And I said, anywhere. And it was a wonderful experience. And I really felt that Peace Corps worked hard to take good care of us. And it was especially evident during the evacuation. As tough as it was, we were cared for.
And then I'm originally from Boston and I'm now in Keene. Thankfully, the journey was very short.
Okay, yep, that's where we're from.
So maybe you should talk about the Peace Corps. Like explain what the benefits or the application
Sure, benefits of
process.
Peace Corps. I actually had a slide and it's not really showing off, but there's so many benefits. I don't need a slide to talk about it.
You can learn Ukrainian.
You can learn the language. The training for Peace Corps is amazing. The first 3 months is dedicated to training to help you with cross-cultural understanding. Language is very, very important. So 6 times a week, you learn language and you actually do learn it. You learn useful things to talk about yourself, to ask for help. Oh, thank you, дякую. Okay. Читаємо, говоримо українською. Yay. You will learn these letters. You will know what it means in 3 months, or sometimes 2 weeks, depending on the program.
And it feels so great, right? When you
It
can
does.
all of a sudden identify the street sign. So when it clicks, you're all of a sudden you're out there, you say, I know what this says. I can read it.
Exactly. You get vacation. You get a free plane ticket to and from the country of service on Peace Corps. You get great networking, like family, basically. You're going to be part of 240,000 of volunteers who served before and who served with you and who will be serving. It's a great networking opportunity. We have volunteers who are now in the government, in nonprofits, in international development, all over the states, all different little towns and big cities, right? It's amazing. And so you will definitely make new friends. And of course, you'll make friends among the locals, which is very, very special. You get vacation time, so you can travel around. Again, cultural integration, we call it integration. You do integrate, you're not a tourist there. You are one of the community members. And yes, it might take a while, whether it's Ukraine or Ghana or Mozambique, it might take a while. You may still be called, oh, that American, or the American lady or American man.
How
but-
long did it take? How long did it take to learn the language?
Well, like I said, the training, how long does it take to learn a language? So the training is for
3 months.
up to 3 months, sometimes 2.5, where you become fairly comfortable with the language, but then you continue to learn. When you move to your community and interact with your host families or your students or your counterparts, and they would actually teach you because you use it or lose it. I was in the Russian-speaking part of the country, but I had a tutor actually. Peace Corps also can provide you with a tutor or the money for the tutor so you could continue to learn based on your preferences, or the kids will teach you. You will be drowning in kids. You will be surrounded by kids in any country you ever go to. They're very curious. They will laugh at you, but they will also teach you very well. And you'll teach them English, and this is why they're actually going to be around you. Am I right? Okay, yes.
Two more questions from people. Okay, so people want to know, like, when were you there and when you came back? All of them.
Okay.
Speakers, and also people want to know whether you participated in other countries, which I know you did.
Sure. Luna, want to start?
Yeah, so I was there. So I actually had like a 6-week break between St. Petersburg. I went home. And by the way, the entire like immigration process to get like a Peace Corps passport, to visa, everything, I did all of that in Moscow, which was an insane time. The embassy in Moscow. But then I went back for 6 weeks and then I flew to Ukraine. And I was there from 2019 until the evacuation in March of 2020. And then they asked if we had been in other Peace Corps countries. For me specifically, I had already had the experience, like the 5 years of experience. I had my bachelor's degree. But they had been looking for someone for about a year or two who could teach English, obviously, who knew deaf culture, and by knowing deaf culture, you know some sort of sign language, and who could speak Russian because they understood that there was only going to be 2 weeks of training. So please tell me that you know a little bit. We're not going to just drop them in the middle and you're on your own. And that's really how I came upon this process. I applied in March and I was in the country by July. And that was a very fast turnaround, but sometimes that happens.
So I went in for 1982 to Honduras right after I finished my undergraduate school. And then I did Ukraine in 2013 and 14. And again, was evacuated before my service ended due to the uprising in the east in Ukraine. And I came home for a short period of time. I don't really remember how long. And then they offered me to go to Mozambique. So I went to Mozambique and served my second year in Mozambique. And that was 2013, 14, and I think by then it might have been 2015.
So it's a little big blur.
Yeah, that's all.
What was the question?
When?
When?
Oh, okay. I began my service in Ukraine in 2017, just before my 69th birthday. And then, so I was there 2 years. I extended for a year, and they also covered flights for me to go home for a month. And came back. Actually, I was gone 6 weeks. My granddaughter graduated from high school at the time, from college rather. Yeah, from college. Anyway, so I extended for a year, which would have been mid 2019 to mid 2020, and we were evacuated. And I very, very much want to go back to Ukraine with Peace Corps. I would be able to do another 6 months. I've held off on getting a dog because I want to go back. I did go back this last summer for this epic wedding. Weddings take more than 2 weeks. And these were both well-liked young people in well-respected families. And the bride's family hosts a reception, the groom's family hosts a reception. Each of these receptions had 500 people at them. Wow. So it's a big deal. So my Peace Corps service in Ukraine is stalled, maybe ended, but my connection with Ukraine is going to be ongoing.
Дякую. And I served in Ukraine from 2018 to 19. Again, this was a response program, more of a niche, more specialized, where you basically are seeked with more experience or language knowledge. But before that, I served for 3 years in Ghana. I started my service in 2014, finished in 2018. It sounds like 4 years, but it was 3 years and like 3 months. Then was 1 year in Ukraine. And then after Ukraine, I applied for a 2-year service in Armenia. And I did exactly 1 year. And I was also evacuated in March 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
So people want to know whether the usual term is 2 years.
Yes, the regular term is 2 years, where again, you will take your time with language, with culture, with integration. Sometimes you feel like you're doing nothing, but you are doing something, because the goals for Peace Corps is not just to help people of interested countries in their projects, in their specialized knowledge for agriculture or English or health. It is to introduce your American experience to them, and also learn about them, learn about the culture, and talk to Americans about the culture. So that's called goal 2, goal 3, which is like a cultural exchange. I think it's actually more important than even like providing with technical knowledge. Even, of course, yes, it's very useful. So this is why we're continuing our mission with sharing our stories.
How competitive is that?
Oh, how competitive is Peace Corps? It is competitive, all right. So I'm going to talk in a recruiter speak. As a recruiter, I'm actually here to make you competitive, because it's not just how many years of experience you have, it's how flexible are you? How patient are you? What cross-cultural or intercultural experiences do you have? Have you ever, I don't know, have you ever had a roommate who was from another country or even from another state? How did you get along? Did you laugh at their accent or did they laugh at yours? Sense of humor, super important. Leadership skills, tutoring skills. So volunteers are, I kind of see them all as facilitators and mentors, but then you also are going to be mentored a lot and you're going to learn a lot. So it's very, very a two-way street of teaching and learning and vice versa. So again, as a recruiter, FYI, I'm not, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I'm not a regional recruiter for New Hampshire yet. I'm applying to change my duty station. But if you go to peacecorps.gov, and it's very easy, peacecorps.gov, you start searching, connect with the recruiter, put your zip code, and you get to your recruiter. I'm currently covering Arizona, but I do have my contact information in case you want to drop me a line. Please keep in touch. Something's up with the slide, so I don't know what happened, but it had more stuff, but this is my email address. Yeah, so it is competitive. Pre-COVID, it was about 2 to 3 percentage, well, or ratio. So it's not just kind of like, hi, I'm here to help. What do I do? You have to actually have your resume ready, like tailored maybe to a position. Have a motivational statement. Why do you want to join Peace Corps? And what coping strategies you will use in the time of need.
And sorry.
And so many references, yeah, they will ask you. I had to get the head researcher at the Science Institute that I've been doing research at to write the recommendation letter. But one thing that I will say for recruiting is let's say, for example, you apply and the recruiter is like, sorry, we don't have a position for you. They may take your resume and forward it on to people and to other recruiters and say like, hey, if you know of anyone and this person fits this qualification or this position, that is perfect. And that's actually how mine came about, because I had been working with a recruiter who was technically a 2-year traditional Peace Corps, and she had forwarded my resume over to Response, and Response had picked it up. And that's how I even learned about Response and started getting it there. So that's where that is where recruiters do come in very, very helpful.
Yaku. Yes,
Are you
question.
in touch with these families now as the war is ongoing?
We're in touch with the families we know now. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I have, no one in the family where I lived spoke English. So I am in touch with them somewhat through Facebook and Facebook Messenger. And I know that they're safe in the village. They're well away from the cities where any conflict is going on. My friend, the English teacher, and I are in closer contact. We'll do FaceTime with Messenger and have long conversations about what's going on. I also have friends who lived in the city of Kyiv, and some of them I know where they are, and one very good friend that I'm concerned about, because I sent her some messages about 3-4 days ago, and she hasn't read them. So I'm hoping that it's just a telephone problem. I do have telephone numbers for her daughter's father, her daughter, and her mother. So I will, by Saturday, if I haven't heard from her, I'm going to start calling other people because I am concerned. My Peace Corps program manager, a wonderful, wonderful man, I know is fighting with the army as a civilian.
Raman,
Yeah. So yes, I've been able to stay in touch with a lot of people, but it also feels so distant at the moment.
And can I add something?
And I wanted to add, we're obviously also friends with Peace Corps staff, the local staff, the language facilitators who taught us the language, the program managers, the everybody, like staff counterparts, exactly. They actually were, I had to come back to Facebook because of this current conflict to basically see if they're okay. At the same time, I gave them grace of like not responding to messages because they're completely, in their own, on, other planet right now,
Yeah.
priorities with being safe and not keeping my, conscience in check. So I know my counterpart actually escaped. He's in Germany. He was in one of the Luna's pictures actually, because he also, I think, worked with the organization. Yep. So they all know each other too. Like, even though it's a different organizations, they all cooperate and collaborate together all the time. And they also go pick up the new volunteer, once a year. So yeah, so he managed to escape because he had a kid with special needs. And the law, the law now, there's a mobilization law, and all men between age of 18 and 60, they have to stay, they cannot go. So they could, ship their wives and kids, but he actually managed because his kid had special needs, and so they're now in Germany. I'm in touch with him, and I'm sending him like links and resources that he could distribute to others who are also about to evacuate. So that's the connection I have.
Yeah, and definitely the same person that we were talking about, our cohort, actually, we were able to raise some funds, and we actually were able to send him some funds a few days ago directly. And that's just really to help with the cost of now considering he's a refugee right now and helping his son out. One thing that we had been talking about, especially like on Facebook and these crisis support networks and groups, is someone had said, reached out to one of their not counterparts, but one of their kids that they had taught at the schools, and they had said, hey, am I bothering you by asking you every day if you're okay? And their honest answer was, you're actually kind of scaring me because I'm trying to figure out other things, and I have other things on my mind. And every day when you're asking, am I okay? Is my family safe? Am I in the bomb shelter? Is just making me worry more about the situation that I'm in. And so we've all come to the understanding is just sending messages and saying, hey, are you okay? I just need to know. Or when you have the time to let me know, please just let me know, but don't get overworked, or don't think that, oh, I have to use the remaining 3% of my battery instead of being in touch with trying to figure out how to get out of the country to be able to help me feel better about myself.
That's what I said, yeah.
Yeah. But my counterpart, I was able to be in touch with her for the first few days or so of when the war started, but for right now, I've not been able to get in touch with her for the last week or so. Same thing with my host grandparents. I haven't heard anything from them, but they are in a smaller village, so that's like my one hope. But all of my students, even though they are deaf, even though their mothers and fathers can take them out of the country, it is either too dangerous to leave where they're currently at. And also they are fearful that if they go to the borders, are they going to be turned away? Or are their fathers going to be turned away, especially if they are the only caregiver for them. And they are also all deaf. So one thing that we've been doing is actually Ukrainian Sign Language interpretation and translation in countries that are currently taking in deaf Ukrainian refugees. So
I'd like to speak to two questions that came up, and just really briefly. I cannot say that I learned the Ukrainian language. I have the speaking skills of a 9-month-old child, and I promise you that child understands a lot more vocabulary than I ever did. But there are workarounds, and it was not a problem. So whether you go to a Spanish-speaking country or whatever, if you have a brain that's not wired for languages, unlike Luna, who can learn them at the drop of a hat, you can still manage.
Yeah. People will help, right?
yeah.
People will help.
Yeah.
People are helpful.
And another benefit to Peace Corps service, especially for younger people, is it gives them something really concrete to put on the resume, to get into grad school, to start working on a doctorate, to get a good job. There are those benefits as well. I went home and just became more retired than I was when I left, which was fine. And I love speaking about Ukraine, so I always look for those opportunities. So,
I have a question.
Yes, please.
In just the course of events these days, do you have any suggestions how we can help and donate and participate a little bit?
Could you repeat the question to the microphone?
Oh, yeah. So the question was essentially, how can we help given the current situation, just as average Americans sitting at home? I'm going to be very blunt. It's going to be financial contributions, and it's going to be making a stand for Ukraine. It is going to be saying that Ukraine is its own sovereign nation. They have their own language, their own culture, their own history, and they deserve to have their own. Those are my two honest answers for that.
And if you want to Google, there's a lot of what they call RPCV, Return Peace Corps Volunteers, friends of, and they're doing a lot of fundraising. We have volunteers that remain in countries, maybe they get married or they decide to live there. And there's Friends of Moldova. There's a volunteer group, Friends of Ukraine. There's a group called Razom, which means together, RAZOM, and those are great fundraising opportunities. I think once you start going to search any of these, you're going to see Peace Corps people on these pages. And if you wanted to dig into their pages, they'll have other avenues. It's important to vet for financial support, but there are some really good ones there that get right to people.
I have another suggestion. There was basically shirt with President Zelensky and his quote, "I don't need a ride, I need ammunition." All the proceeds are going to basically finance the army. So if you want to finance for an army, which I am, and I'm a pacifist person, please. There are other causes that basically 100% of proceeds would go to like humanitarian aid. But another thing I keep telling to people overall is just be kind to each other. Be good neighbors. Ukraine right now is a mirror of what can happen. Because again, it's not just Ukrainians who are suffering, and it's not because I'm Russian Ukrainian. I am both. and both of my parts supposed to hate each other, but they love each other, otherwise I would have imploded. Russians are also hostages to that regime, and this is what happens when there is a war waging in people's heads years before the tanks started rolling in. This is the sign for America to be united. I know it may sound like a preacher, but the vigil last week, the rabbi talked about the same thing. The immigrant from Kiev talked about the same thing, that Putin is afraid of united America, and this is what we have to be. And by starting to be nice to each other, or continuing to be kind neighbors. Thank you.
I just happen to have a short list.
There you go.
There are three organizations that I'm sure that you've heard of. They're easy to find online, and it's direct contributions to organizations that are already really good at helping. The International Committee of Red Cross, the International, and Red Cross is humanitarian, right across the board. The International Rescue Committee focuses on helping people to get to safety. Doctors Without Borders, as you probably know, provide medical assistance. The Returned Peace Corps Volunteers Alliance for Ukraine, and it's called allianceforukraine.org. They are raising money right now to provide first aid kits at the front line. If you go to their website, there's a Give Now button, and you can help towards that. And then one of my very good Peace Corps friends lives in Sebastopol, California. And there is a Sebastopol World Fund. So the website address is sebastopolwf.org. And on that site, there is a list of various organizations, some of these and many others, that are working hard to directly support Ukraine. And then there's a lot of little stuff that goes on. And some of it is very definitely vouched by Peace Corps volunteers. One of my Peace Corps friends lives in California, is a horsewoman, and has been helping to raise funds to get horses evacuated or horses cared for in some of the cities. There are organizations that, well, you can buy tickets to go to a zoo that you'll never go to, but that money will help support the zoo animals. Another fella raised money through GoFundMe to buy pickup trucks that are going into Ukraine full of supplies. And then his plan is to turn the trucks over to the Ukrainian armed forces. I have a little Subaru that's packed to the gills right now with sleeping bags. Another Peace Corps friend who is at the Shaker Village here in New Hampshire, Canterbury Shaker Village. She has been working with her counterpart from Ukraine to collect sleeping bags. She just recently sent 80. She hopes to be able to eventually send several hundred, as many as she can get, because sleeping bags are very, very important for people who've had to leave everything. And I collected these 30 sleeping bags over just a couple of weeks' time from people in the Farmington community, and it didn't take a very big effort to do it. So I would encourage to keep your ears open for opportunities. Maybe check GoFundMe campaigns. You've got to be really careful there.
Yeah, GoFundMe, yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah, you have to
asterisk,
be
big
really,
asterisk.
really careful.
I would rather go to like,
The Alliance.
and the big charities that you
Right,
mentioned.
right.
Do you mind passing this around?
No, not at
If you
all.
wanna take
Not
a
at all.
picture.
Take a
Yes.
picture, copy it on the trip.
Yeah.
Somebody on Zoom wants to know, the organization to support the military.
So I was gonna share, and this is actually a personal message from one of my friends who I knew for a good year, and who's currently in Kiev, but originally from my hometown. And he said to all my foreign friends, this is me, whether we chatted online, met in my or your travels, or actually friends, I'm sharing it all to you. You see all the horrors happening in my country, you want to know to help, but don't know how, where to go, what to do, who to ask. Well, here's a little website that accumulates most known ways to help, and it is supportukrainenow.org.
SupportUkraineNow.org.
Once again, that is supportukrainenow.org, and I'll go ahead and type it in the next moment or two into the chat box. There are hundreds of ways, and even the minimal one, like joining a meeting in your city, sending €5 to a charity, or sharing this message to your social media. We are stronger in numbers. Please help in any way you can. So no way is too small, but again.
One thing I want to say is that there's a bunch of individual acts happening, like the sleeping bags. There's a former volunteer in Moldova, and I can put it in the chat room. Her parents were with us in Ukraine. They did 2 tours, so 4 years, while their daughter was a Peace Corps volunteer in Moldova, which was pretty neat. She's still there. She married a Moldovan man, but she's taking money through PayPal, and she sends pictures. I put them on Facebook, how she loads up her hatchback and drives them to the refugees in Moldova. So I just want to say, as you see all the information about the people in Ukraine with these amazing individual acts, trying to find people, trying to get rides for people, making Molotov cocktails, we are all individuals that can do a lot of good. So I hope you'll feel pressed to go do something.
Airbnb, did you guys hear the
Yes.
story? Brilliant, brilliant. And another resource for anyone who lives in Europe or here even, and want to shelter Ukrainian refugee, they'll be coming. It's shelterforua.com. So shelterfor.ua.com. It has to have HTTP blah, 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 www. And so you can, if you have a place, if you have a room to host, there will be a map. You can enter your information and you'll be one of the resources.
And what was the other, something for Ukraine?
Support
Support for Ukraine.
Support.
And that's
Support
FOR,
Ukraine now.
FOR, right?
Support
FOR. Okay,
No, the one you mentioned.
Yes, so the one that I mentioned again is support for FOR Ukraine now.org. And I'm hoping that someone's gonna be typing that into the chat in a moment or so. And that's not just like you donate directly there, that literally has a comprehensive list. If you want money to go to the military, there's links for that. If you wanted to go to the humanitarian, accommodations, transportation, food, any and everything, meetups in your city, those types of things.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have 2 minutes for a song?
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, right, your guitar.
Oh, you can actually, if you, I'll show it.
Show it.
Was the Ukrainian Sign Language National Anthem song.
Aw.
There.
Okay, yes. Let's do it. Yeah, but it's people need to go home.
Or actually, you can do the song and then I'll leave that like on the background as people are leaving.
Ba-da-bum. This song was taught by my grandma.
And what is this instrument, please?
It's a travel guitar. It's not Ukrainian, but
Yeah, that's good. Good try.
okay, it's not tuned, but sing along if you know the lyrics. Несе Галя воду, корови слогнеться, а за неї Іванко, як барвінок в'ється, а за неї Іванко, як барвінок в'ється. Галю ж моя, Галю, дай води напиться, ти ж така хороша, дай хоч подивитися, ти ж така хороша, дай хоч подивитися. Тарадам, дарайрарам, тарадам, дарайрарам, Дуже дякую. Thank you, everyone.